Colorado-class Super Dreadnought battleship was the last pre-treaty battleship designed during World War I for the U.S. Navy. The class consisted of 4 ships, 3 of which were completed: Colorado, Maryland, Washington, and West Virginia. 3 of these ships were launched. Washington was only 75% complete when she was scrapped to comply with the Washington Naval Treaty in 1922. The Colorado class was armed with 16-inch guns, making them the most powerful U.S. battleships ever built until the North Carolina class entered service, some 20 years later. The Colorados were also the last standard-type battleships, and apart from the 16-inch guns, they were essentially repeats of the Tennessee class. They were the last American capital ships built with 4 turrets and twin-mounted guns. These larger guns were fitted as a result of the 16.1-inch armed Nagato class of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Built for the U.S. Navy by the New York Shipbuilding Corporation and Newport News from 1917 to 1923, the class consisted of 4 ships, 3 of which were completed. These monsters displaced 32,600 long tons, were 190.27 meters long, 624 feet 3 inches, had a 29.67 meter beam, 97 foot 4 inches, and a draft of 9.3 meters, 30 feet 6 inches. Each ship had 8 Babcock and Wilcox water tube boilers turning 4 screws through a turbo-electric transmission, creating 28,900 shaft horsepower, pushing the ship to a top speed of 21 knots, 39 kilometers an hour, 24 miles an hour. They had a range of about 8,000 nautical miles, 15,000 kilometers, 9,200 miles, at 10 knots, 19 kilometers an hour, 12 miles an hour. They had a complement of 1,080 men. Each ship was armed with 8 16-inch 45 caliber Mark I guns in 4 turrets, 2 fore and 2 aft, as well as 12 or 14 5-inch 51 caliber guns and 2 21-inch torpedo tubes, but this would change throughout their service careers. Their belt armor had a maximum thickness of 13.5 inches, 343 millimeters. The barbettes were 13 inches thick, 330 millimeters, and the turret face was 18 inches, 457 millimeters. The conning tower was 11.5 inches, 292 millimeters, and the decks had 3.5 inches of armor, 89 millimeters. All of this was Krupp steel. Even though designs for a 16-inch gun ship were in the works as early as 1913, the Secretary of the Navy was worried that jumping to this caliber would make other battleships still on the drawing board obsolete before they were built. As a result, designs were limited in the future, and instead of hedging their bets against foreign designs, they had to essentially wait until those foreign designs caught up. The gun was approved in October of 1912, and the first successful test firing occurred in August of 1914. This, alongside the widespread adoption of 15 and 16-inch guns across the major naval powers, including the American rivals of Germany, Great Britain, and Japan, primarily Japan, the U.S. looked into how to get a 16-inch gun ship out quickly. It almost killed the Pennsylvania class that was under construction at the time. However, due to the massive 8,000-ton weight jump from the previous Nevada class, twice as much as the already large jump to the current Pennsylvania class, the upgunned ship was not ordered. And as usual, this turned into a long, drawn-out debate, with each year the Navy proposing a 16-inch gun design, and each year the President and the Secretary of the Navy turning it down due to cost, and would order another pair of standard-class battleships instead. Finally, by 1917, more than 3 years into World War I at this point, but still before the U.S.'s entrance into that conflict, and a year or so out from the Battle of Jutland, Secretary of the Navy Josephus Daniels finally allowed the armament of U.S. battleships to be upgraded. However, no other change would be allowed. You were so close to making that perfect. So close. This meant that the Colorados were essentially the older Tennessees, which themselves were based on the New Mexicos, but with 16-inch guns. However, these ships were quite good, and the design would carry even further over into the South Dakota, the 1920s one not the fast battleship, and the Lexington-class battlecruiser designs. Part of this was a result of wartime experience and the convenience of mass-produced standardized ships. This was the era of the Wicks and Clemson spam, after all, which were basically being built on assembly lines. This would be scaled up with the Naval Act of 1916, which called for a whopping 16 battleships and 6 battlecruisers. This meant that U.S. capital ships had to be standardized as much as possible, implementing improvements wherever possible. For example, most of the improvements of the Tennessee class were done before the first beam of the keel was laid. There were still issues, of course, with them, mostly regarding their protection scheme, but again, a topic for another video. As far as I can tell, the eventual improvements made were standard on the Colorados, but if anyone knows otherwise, feel free to let me know in the comments below. These ships were similar to the Tennessees overall, and like the Tennessees, they featured a clipper bow in order to make the main deck drier even during rough weather. One of the major improvements from the Tennessee that carried over into the new Colorados were the mounting of the secondary armament in the superstructure instead of the hull, meaning they could actually be used in something other than a flat column. These guns would mostly be replaced in 1942 by 5-inch 38 caliber Mark 12 guns in twin turrets. The Mark 12 fired a 25 kilogram, 55-pound projectile to a max range just shy of 16,000 meters, about 17,400 yards, and a max elevation of 11,300 meters, 37,200 feet at 45 degrees. These guns were fast loading due to being power rammed, even though they were hand loaded. Proximity fuses introduced in 1943 made them an even more potent anti-aircraft weapon than they already were. The initial anti-aircraft armament for these ships were 4 76mm 3-inch 23 caliber guns. This was quickly increased to 8 in 1922. The stats for the following AA guns will appear on the screen because I can't be bothered to read it all out. Anyway, these were replaced in 1928 and 29 to an equal number of 5-inch 25s. The 525s had a 15 to 20 round rate of fire, but were inferior to the later 538s in potency. These guns were supplemented by 11 1.1-inch Chicago pianos in 1937 and 38. Much like most of the U.S. Navy in 1942, the Colorados had their anti-aircraft suite completely overhauled. In addition to the 538s mentioned above, they carried 16 40mm Bofors in 4 quad mounts, and up to 32 20mm Oerlikons in single mounts. 1944 saw another refit, as the Navy found the 20mm wasn't really good enough to take down kamikaze aircraft, and the high closing speeds made these manual weapons too slow to respond anyway. These guns were removed and replaced with more quad 40s. Maryland eventually carried as many as 40 quad 40s and 18 20mm. Colorado had the same number of 40mm barrels but retained all the 20mm. West Virginia was the most American of them all, carrying 40 40mm guns and 50 20mm guns, ensuring that the entire crew could uphold their Second Amendment rights in the face of the enemy. There were further changes specific to each ship apart from what has been mentioned here, but as usual, they will be in their own separate videos. Alright, on to the opinion section. I'll be brief. It's a big American battleship. It's pretty cool. I like it. I mentioned the Nagato earlier and how it was supposed to counter that. I think the Colorado was better. We never got to see Nagato and the Colorado go up against each other, as far as I'm aware, because the Nagatos, much like the Yamatos, were kept in the home islands for some ungodly reason. Yeah, that's just how they fought the war. But yeah, very good designs, and like for second generation super dreadnoughts, which by 1944 were pretty much obsolete. Well, not obsolete, but they were definitely on their way out. The fast battleship had completely surpassed ships like the Colorado at this point. But they were still very, very effective fighting units, as we'll touch on when we talk about the careers of the ships of the class. Very, very good. And quite modern, even in the early 1920s for, again, second generation super dreadnought battleships, beginning to solve some of the problems of the previous generations of dreadnought battleships. It's surprising that it took this long to figure out to move the secondary battery up a deck to keep it from getting wet. But nevertheless, here we go. But yeah, no, very effective fighting unit. If you can't have a fast battleship, take one of these. They're definitely good. If they had seen service in World War One, which they weren't completed in time for World War One anyway, but in a World War One or 1920 setting, they were certainly probably the most powerful battleship or one of the most powerful battleships in the world. You can make an argument for the Queen Elizabeths and HMS Hood, and probably the Nagatos, but all of them are in the running, and my personal vote would probably go for Colorado. Yeah, that's just me. Yeah, and when they've been refit, I mean, we'll talk about this more when we talk about West Virginia, but West Virginia looks really good when it's been refit. Like, they're some of the best looking battleships after a refit. So yeah, that's all that needs to be said on there for opinion. I have a website now. The link's appearing on your screen now and is in the description, probably, maybe. And might be on my YouTube channel. I don't know if that works. Go check it out. Probably not a lot up there right now. Maybe. I don't know. It depends. Hopefully by now there is a blog post about the EMD GP30, assuming I've written it and I've uploaded it in time. Yeah, we'll see about that one. And check out all my social media stuff that's somewhere on my channel. I should really start putting that in the description of videos, but I can't be bothered. You can find it on my About page on my YouTube channel because it gives you an excuse to go to my YouTube channel. So do that. Follow me on all the places. Check out my website. Like, comment, subscribe. Other things that I usually say that I can't remember what to say. All that fun stuff. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye.